Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us on today's webinar titled Ethanol Producer Magazine's 2022 Editorial Review. My name is John Nelson, Vice President of Operations, Marketing, and Sales for Ethanol Producer Magazine and BVI International, and I'm joined today with Tom Bryan, the editor of Ethanol Producer Magazine and president of BVI International. A couple housekeeping items before we get started. Today's webinar is recorded, so if you do want to review some items or send it to someone, we will have it up for your review probably within 48 hours. We'll make that accessible to everyone. And then secondly, if you have any questions, we will take the questions and someone will follow up. We will not be answering them live here, but if you do have questions, someone from our team will follow up accordingly. So with that, what we're going to cover today is we'll take a look at some of our reach. We'll look at some of the advertising opportunities and some of the facts around print and advertising inside of Ethanol Producer Magazine. And then we'll get to the editorial highlights with Tom, and that's what a lot of people want to hear about. What are the hot topics? What are we going to be covering as a magazine? And then at the end, exclusive to this webinar, we have a discount that we will provide all those in attendance. So with that, we'll chat a little bit about who we reach. So when you look at this slide, and we do have all this information in our media kit on ethanolproducer.com. You can download the entire media kit and take a look at the stats and numbers in even more detail. And if you do have questions on them, please ask one of our account managers. We'll be more than happy to discuss those with you in further detail. So taking a look at our online and social media platforms, we receive nearly 800,000 page views per year, so 788,000 page views globally per year. Now, how does that make up with just U.S.? U.S. visitors, now these are unique visitors, make up 165,000 of our audience each year. So you have 165,000 unique visitors coming to our site, producing almost 800,000 page views globally. So again, there's a big chunk that's outside the U.S. There's a good chunk that's inside the U.S. The majority of our audience, though, is inside the U.S. So if you are looking to target ethanol producers in that audience, inside the U.S., this is the place to be. And our social media footprint, now we have 200,000 there. So we have, if you look in the bottom right corner of the slide, you can see we have all of our social media listed, from Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. We also have YouTube, where we post a lot of our information. With all those combined, we have 200,000 followers. So unique followers. And again, why is that important? That's important because every story that Tom and his team produce, write, post, that's being sent out over our social media platform, and that is being clicked on, and that's coming back to our website. Again, if you are doing online advertising, it's important because those stories are being pushed out on our social media platforms, and people are coming back to read those stories and look at your advertisements. So again, everything we do, we post, and we keep that active and keep that audience engaged as much as possible. And that is our goal here at Ethanol Producer Magazine. So taking a look at our print, we have 5,000. Each month we print 5,000 magazines that go out to our readers. And then we also see, with that, those go to every ethanol production facility inside the U.S., and we also send to Canada and some other ethanol production facilities. But every advertisement that you purchase will go to an ethanol production facility. We actually send multiple, and that includes our directories and our maps as well, which we'll talk here in a moment. We also have our digital audience. And so everything we post, we know there's 33,000. So every magazine that gets posted, we know 33,000 people are watching that as well, and we send that out over our lists with some of our subscribers. And then we know about a lot of how this is made up. We know all of our readers based on third-party research. We see, our digital print views going up. So we post everything on Issue. This is a platform where you can post your print magazine in digital format, and we see a lot of views coming through that as well. So again, if you're looking to to buy advertising in the print publication, we have the eyeballs. People will be looking at your advertisement. It's a great platform, and where people are really engaged, and we find that our audience is very engaged from the print standpoint. And we'll go over some facts on print advertising here in a moment as well. Next, we have events and webinars. So we do have the ability to produce a webinar for you, custom webinars. And we do about 10 a year in Ethanol Producer Magazine. It varies year to year. But if you are a sponsor of Ethanol Producer Magazine's webinar series, like today, you'll have, through the advertising, through our emails, our promotion of it, online ads, you're going to get 150,000 impressions alone just by doing an event, a digital event and webinar. So definitely want you to take a look at that. We see on average about 150 to 200 registered attendees for those events. So again, a great way to dial in on a very specific topic and a niche audience. Our newsletter. We send out our newsletter to 70,000 subscribers. And so we have multiple newsletters. We have our Ethanol Weekly. So Tom and his team are busy writing stories and collecting stories that are relevant and timely, and we send that out weekly. And then we also have our Ethanol Retail list that we send out monthly. And so those are, again, if you're looking for some advertising in a digital format where you can track and you can really monitor who's, the clicks on the dollars that are being spent, it's a great format for you. We send that out. It's a great way to build your brand quickly. We do 64 of these newsletters a year combined between Ethanol Week and Ethanol Retail. And it really is, based on our research, this is where people go. They get that information about the ethanol industry from these newsletters. So again, it's one of the most timely ways to get information out, and we highly encourage you to take a look at the rates and open rates of that as well. So in addition, we have some ancillary products to Ethanol Producer Magazine. We've talked about online, we've talked about print, some digital offerings, but we also have the directories and maps, and those, we have a spring and a fall map, and we also have our directories. And so those are great options as well. We'll talk a little bit more about those, but I definitely encourage people to take a look at that. We get about 7,200 plus readers alone just with the directories and maps. So a lot of eyeballs, a lot of targeted people watching that, looking at our maps and our online directory and print directory. One last thing from that slide, I did want to talk about. I know we switched over here, but we have the top 5 industries, and the number one readers here are, and you saw this on the slide, were the producers, and they made up 20% of our readership. So again, 20% of our readership are biofuels producers. So if you are looking to get in front of biofuels industry, ethanol producers specifically, this is the magazine to be in, and it has been for 27 years. And so we'll take a look at some other opportunities. Again, we've got our print magazine, which we talked about. We've got some of our circulation. We've got our maps with ethanol plant maps. We've got our fuel ethanol industry. You can see that we've got our impressions there and our circulation with that. We've got our online, kind of reviewing some of our online options. We've got our custom. We've got our custom packages here where we do our digital press packages. So we actually will do press releases sent out over our news feeds. We'll also go over a paid wire where we send that out on your behalf, and we also will post those stories. So those are some great options. Again, if you're looking to ramp up, and that's fairly new to Ethanol Producer Magazine. So if you're looking to ramp up quickly, whether it's you have something extremely timely that needs to get out, or you're just looking to ramp up your brand or launch something new, it's a great option for you as well. So take a look at our digital press packages inside our media kits. They're great options. We also have some spotlight features, which Tom and his team work with you and work on a story that might be that's relevant to the theme, or maybe something that you want to talk about that's unique to your business, and that's an option as well in our spotlight features, and that's within the print issue of Ethanol Producer Magazine. And then we also have some custom reprints. So if it's something you are featured in, if let's say you do have a feature and you're saying, hey, this would be great if I could print this off and have some copies of this magazine and do some leave behinds at other events or whatever it may be, or when you're talking with a customer, custom reprints are a great option, and we can work with you to produce those and send them to you as well. Again, we have our events and webinars. And then, when you're looking at the webinars, we get roughly 150 to 200 registered attendees on those. We also have our International Fuel Ethanol Workshop, which Tom is going to go through some of our bonus distribution with our events. We have our Carbon Capture and Storage Summit, and then some other offerings that we have, our Biodiesel Magazine, Biomass Magazine, Biodiesel and the Renewable Diesel Summit, and then we also have the International Conference and Expo. So again, if the bottom line is Ethanol Producer Magazine is the #1 source for industry news, trends, and stats, and it is the #1 place where ethanol producers go. So if you're looking to launch your product, build brand awareness, engage in an audience, this is the place to be, specifically with ethanol producers. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Tom and let him talk a little bit about the themes and bonus distribution.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks again for joining us today. Ethanol Producer Magazine has been the industry's go-to source for industry news and in-depth technical coverage for more than 27 years now, and we sort of think about our editorial roles in really 3 distinct categories. We think about policy, we think about markets, and of course we think about production. When I say production, I mean the technology that goes into it and the operations of running a plant. And while policy and markets are of course vital to everything we do, our print publication focuses mostly on the production and operation of the ethanol plants. And so you're going to see that reflected here in the themes that we've got lined up for 2022. They're very specific. Doesn't mean we're not covering everything else in the broad field of ethanol production, but we're honing in on some specific topics here in 2022 that we think you'll find interesting. All production-oriented, new tech, production inputs, plant services, ways producers are reaching new operational efficiencies, things like maintenance, quality control, data, analytics, all the things related to running ethanol plants more profitably and with maximum results. And that's what we're all about. As you know, the mission of Ethanol Producer Magazine is about production, and it has been for more than a quarter century. On the other hand, I want to say that our website, John talked about our online component of the magazine, ethanolproducer.com, often provides broader editorial coverage, truly comprehensive coverage of all the policy and regulatory and market issues happening in our industry, as well as the production stories that you'll find in the magazine. So EPM.com is really the industry's storehouse of ethanol industry information, just a truly deep and searchable archive going back years. So if you haven't checked out what ethanolproducermagazine.com has to offer, please do that. It's just a really rich source of industry information. And our news editor, Aaron Vogley, who's been with us for more than a decade, does a truly great job just maintaining the site and covering everything across the industry. If you've got a press release you want to share with the industry, work with Aaron. Contact her, and if it's newsworthy, of course, she'll be happy to get it up right away. And if you've got a contribution you want to try to get on the site or get in the magazine, contact Aaron or contact myself. We're always looking for story ideas, and we really want your input throughout the year. So before I dive into the 2022 themes, I've just got a few. They always want me to say a few things about the industry and how things are looking. I talked about policy, I talked about markets and production. So from a policy perspective, not to try to stand in for our associations, I'd never do that. But let me just give you a recap of what we're seeing here at Ethanol Producer Magazine. We would look at the industry from a policy perspective. The big news, I think 3 weeks before the FEW, our big summer conference, the Supreme Court did overturn a key piece of legislation, the 10th Circuit Court's landmark ruling on small refinery exemptions, that said refiners can in fact petition for an exemption from the renewable fuel standard even if they haven't received an exemption previously. And that previous rule was kind of the big victory that we had held in our hand for a couple of years there. And so that was a setback. That was a disappointing day by itself. But then just a week later, the DC Circuit Court sided with oil refiners and said the U.S. EPA had exceeded its authority by giving E15 under the Trump administration the same volatility waiver that E10 enjoys. So those two different, but both sort of disappointing court decisions were kind of a blow to the industry. But our association leaders have, again and again over the past several weeks assured us that neither one of these court battles is over. We're still working with the courts. We're still working with the EPA, and we're still battling to get this right. So, our association leaders, including Jeff Cooper from the RFA, who spoke at the FEW in July, has assured us that, it's not going to be easy for these obligated parties to go in and get these waivers, small refinery exemptions. They've got to show hardships, and they've got to show that they were caused solely by the RFS, which is not only hard to do, but possibly next to impossible. So that's happening, on the policy front. As far as E15 goes, yes, it's been a setback to see this court ruling, and with the potential of kind of having a setback in terms of using E15 in the summertime months. But again, our associations have said that the current E15 rule should remain in place for the time being as appeals are playing out. And in other words, it's just not over yet. So those things are happening on the policy front. Again, some setbacks, and it's kind of dominated the headlines on our website for quite a while. As that's been happening, some other events have also occurred. We've seen the introduction of a interesting piece of legislation on the Hill. The Next Generation Fuels Act of 2021 was introduced recently in the House, and while it's early, this bill does provide what we think is an interesting look at what a national high-octane standard might look like. So, and regardless of what becomes of it, it's exciting to see this bill. Check it out if you have a chance, because as it really moves the dialogue forward for our industry in terms of getting blending standards and automaker regulations in line with our industry's vision of where higher ethanol blends could be, talking about E20, E30. And I think everyone in our industry agrees that we need that to happen. We need to see those mid-level blends come to fruition if we're going to be competitive with electric vehicles from a carbon neutral or carbon negative position in the decades to come. So again, not sure what's going to happen with that legislation, but it really does start to move that conversation forward. And finally, from a policy perspective, the EPA just a few days ago delivered its proposed rule to set the annual volume percentage standards the RVOs, Renewable Volume Obligation Standards, sent that rule over to the White House Office of Management and Budget, the OMB, which is the final step before the proposed rule is released for public comment. So we don't really know what's in the rule. There's been a lot of angst in the industry, a lot of worry about where the number is going to land, or are the number is going to be lower or higher than previously. The EPA did not release its RVOs in 2021 as it should have for compliance years 2021, and it's doing 2021 and 2022 together. And so a little bit of a mess there at the EPA. We'll see how that plays out. Never a dull regulatory or policy moment when it comes to ethanol. So that's the policy landscape right now, and it's complicated. When it comes to the markets, I'd have to say we at Ethanol Producer Magazine think things are going pretty okay. Without getting into margins, it's fair to say ethanol prices are strong right now due to a number of factors: the summer driving season, the protracted rebound from COVID, higher gas prices caused by a multitude of factors, including Hurricane Ida, volatility in the Middle East. All these things are leading to higher gas prices. We've got $3 gas, we've got $5 corn. And so, as you'd expect with that kind of environment, ethanol prices have tracked higher in the $2 range, mid $2 range. And I think that's kept things pretty manageable from a margins perspective for ethanol producers. Certainly better than the 90-cent ethanol we saw last summer. So the bottom line, though, I think for everyone on the call is that U.S. ethanol, the industry is currently producing somewhere between 900,000 and 1 million barrels of ethanol a day. And that's consistent with an industry that's producing up to 16 billion gallons of ethanol a year. We've ratcheted down just recently in the past couple of weeks from that number, but certainly throughout the summer, that's where we've been at. The industry is producing at or close to its normal levels, and that's good to see. Co-products are doing pretty well. Distillers' grains prices have risen to slightly over $200 a ton as the market has tightened up this fall. And distillers' corn oil, DCO, has maintained solid demand. We've seen the demand for corn oil stay strong, particularly because of the rise of renewable diesel. Corn oil is a coveted feedstock for renewable diesel, and we're seeing a lot more production planned and coming online in that industry. So there's been significant action there. And in fact, we just did a story about Christensen benchmarking data that showed that revenue from co-products from ethanol plants has reached 27% of overall plant income as recently as the first quarter of 2021. So co-product revenue is, if nothing else, just rising as a percentage of overall income. We expect that to continue. So that's the markets, and I think technology will be the third prong of our coverage, and a lot of that will be covered as I go through the 12 months of the year. We're going to be talking about everything from new efficiencies with ethanol plants, predictive maintenance, co-product opportunities, as I mentioned, innovative new technologies, new instruments, new gadgets for the plant, leveraging plant data, unlocking more corn oil, going after corn fiber, taking advantage of new products, and on and on. We will start by taking a look at January, of course. And in January, we will look at how new enzymes and yeasts are taking ethanol yields to new heights, boosting plant efficiencies, counteracting production challenges, and really enabling ethanol plants to diversify and evolve. We'll look at how new fermentation products can open up doors for producers and bring value to their bottom line, how leveraging these sort of evolved products like glucoamylase expressing yeast can help producers take their operation to the next level, and how new products like these are validated in real-world conditions, because that's important to how they're trialed at ethanol plants. We'll do all that and a whole lot more. And if your company is involved with yield maximization, a lot of you are, fermentation products, enzymes, yeast, if that's your business, talk to us about your plans and how you would like to leverage this opportunity to work with us in January on content. And that magazine will be distributed at the Iowa Renewable Fuels Summit. Let's move on to February. In February, we will dive into data. Leveraging plant data wherever or however it can be gotten is very important to ethanol plants, especially as it relates to how ethanol plant labs act as the central control centers for quality control, quality assurance, process analysis, and all the information that can help producers maximize the conditions that make ethanol plants run better. So data-driven plant optimization, I think it's really about the old maxim of work smarter, not harder. I think that kind of captures what we're going to be writing about in this issue of Ethanol Producer Magazine. It's about process insight. It's about troubleshooting. Artificial intelligence, AI, has been brought up recently and written about in our magazine. The power of prediction and a lot more. So if your company has any solutions, products, technologies that lie in this data space or overlap with it, think about working with us on the February issue, which will be distributed at the National Ethanol Conference and the Growth Energy Executive Leadership Conference. Okay. March. The March issue will have an emphasis on plant cleaning. That could mean both the cleaning that takes place routinely throughout the year, but also that the in-depth twice annually or quarterly cleaning that happens when plants are shut down, the shutdown cleaning, which not only requires specialized shutdown services, but then the varied service providers that come in and clean and descale, the hydroblasters, dry blasting, other media, the hydrovacking that goes on, all the necessary equipment that needs to be cleaned, from the evap equipment to the heat exchangers throughout the plant. We'll dig into everything related to those shutdown services and that in-depth cleaning, from scheduling, logistics, and try to shed new light on how producers are leveraging these plant shutdowns to make their plants more efficient, more reliable, and ultimately safer too. Last year, I know we did a big story on how producer schedules for shutdowns had shifted during the pandemic, and a lot of them were going to stick with those new schedules moving forward. So we'll definitely check in and see if that has stayed the same or changed. This issue, the March issue, will be mailed to all attendees of the National Ethanol Conference, and it will also be distributed at the International Biomass Conference and Expo, which is planned for Jacksonville, Florida, and the Biofuels International Conference and Expo. In April, we will jump into bacterial control, antimicrobials, both antibiotics, non-antibiotics, the whole gamut, as well as all the supportive and sort of ancillary methods of fighting bacterial outbreaks in ethanol plants. That could be CIP and the additive packages that go along with that. That could be understanding the chemistries of how yeast inhibition happens when bacteria strike, to even things like the high-tech areas of molecular biology and how biology can be used to pick the most effective antimicrobials for a given challenge. So bacterial control is a lot more broad than a lot of people might think it is. It really impacts every aspect of production. There's a lot of different elements to it, a lot of different touch points in terms of the service providers and product suppliers that help producers fight it. So we're eager to tackle that subject in April, and hope you can help us with content. That will be distributed at the AOCS annual meeting. In May, we will really push our team and I hope push some of the top producers in the business to help us explore this unfolding new world, this exciting new opportunity of high protein feed production. There's absolutely no question that high pro feed, these high protein co-products, are really probably the future of our industry, or a big part of it. Already we're seeing companies like Green Plains Inc. rolling out these ambitious high protein feed production platforms at their facilities, and they're not alone in that quest. There are a lot of producers that are moving forward with similar plans, and they see it as a total shift change in our sector. And for that reason, I hope you'll work with us to make the May issue as insightful and smart and forward-leaning as it possibly can be, by looking at the technologies, the markets, the financial considerations, everything behind this whole new facet of our industry that is high protein feed production. It will be distributed as we call it the hotel drop. This magazine will be delivered to the hotel rooms of all the attendees of the International Fuel Ethanol Workshop and Expo, the FEW, which is happening in Minneapolis next June. And speaking of June, the June issue will focus on corn fiber ethanol technologies. I think more broadly it'll focus on corn fiber. It doesn't necessarily have to be corn fiber to ethanol. That's just kind of the critical, or maybe the go-to subject when it comes to corn fiber, is converting that fiber into ethanol. But there are other reasons to do it. Corn fiber to ethanol, maybe you haven't seen it so much in the headlines lately, but I assure you that neither the opportunity, and it is a big opportunity, nor the producer interest in it has waned. Separating and unlocking corn fiber is actually, as I said, it's bigger than just getting the ethanol. It's not only about going after those D3 RINs, but ethanol is probably the main target for most. There's more to it. At the FEW, we heard from various companies, various researchers who are looking at enzymatically modifying corn to yield more fiber, and also new ways to separate that fiber from the kernel. So the science behind it, the mechanics of doing it, and actually applying that to real world conditions is playing out right now. There's a number of producers that are pursuing corn fiber to ethanol. Ace Ethanol LLC in Wisconsin is among them, that is actively working on that today. So we're excited to cover corn fiber and corn fiber to ethanol in June. That magazine will be distributed as the main magazine at the FEW, at the International Fuel Ethanol Workshop and Expo. It'll be in the attendee bags. It will also be distributed at the event that will be co-located with the FEW this June, and that is, I'm happy to announce, the Carbon Capture and Storage Summit. We're doing a whole co-located event on the subject of CCS. More on that to come. July, if you're involved with ethanol plant maintenance in any way whatsoever, talk to us about the July issue. We really would appreciate your input. In July, we'll cover predictive and I assume preventative maintenance, and that includes not just the best practices in maintenance, but technologies that maintenance managers and the technicians that work with them can lean on to get their jobs done faster, better, more safely. We'll get into all the topics of maintenance, improved asset management, condition-based maintenance, condition monitoring, all the things that lead to improved plant reliability and ultimately cost reduction, greater profitability, and as I said, safety. So that's what July is going to be all about. It will be mailed to all the attendees of the 2022 FEW and also distributed at the ASABE annual meeting. Let's move on to August. The August theme, we've talked a little bit about distillers corn oil already. Seems like something that, I know a lot of people would say, well, do you need a whole theme on distillers corn oil maximization? We think we do. We think there's enough to talk about. We don't have to fill a whole magazine with it, but we think there's a cover story waiting to happen each and every year on corn oil. There was a time when a lot of producers, maybe half the industry, was talking about the pros and cons of removing too much corn oil. They didn't want to remove too much, and some still don't. There's still a conversation there, but you don't hear it as much. Producers now, a lot of them anyway, seem to be really aggressively going after the top yield they can get with DCO, and that's kept this subject on our list of themes. Corn oil is a big deal. The revenue from corn oil makes a real difference. It's been a big difference maker in our industry and a big contributor to the bottom line, especially these days during the pandemic. It was a big help to have that extra revenue. And in fact, we're seeing that producers, aren't talking about any discount happening on the distiller's grain side by taking these higher amounts of corn oil out. Just this summer at the FEW, we heard from James Broghammer of Pine Lake Corn Processors, among those producers that are pursuing higher levels of corn oil, and and he told us that Pine Lake is actually going after corn oil yields as high as 1.25 pounds per bushel. So that's what we want to report on. We want to know not only what plants are doing, but how they're getting there, how they're getting those higher levels, the technology and the products behind achieving those new numbers. So that's what we're going to pursue in August. That magazine will be distributed at the American Coalition for Ethanol annual conference. September will be focused on higher quality specialty alcohols, those higher end alcohols, and how they're produced, how plants are making adaptations to their operations to be producers of high end alcohols. During the pandemic, we, as most of you know, saw the industry step up and start to produce alcohol for hand sanitizer. That ultimately led to a lot of them pursuing higher grades of alcohols as the standards increased. And that meant they started producing what we call USP grade alcohol, which is a higher grade alcohol that has been achieved by dozens of producers in the industry. And we're seeing this move to higher grade alcohol from producers across the spectrum. Big producers, Poet, ADM, and others have made big announcements about producing higher quality alcohols. So the next thing that we think is happening, and we're seeing happening already, is producers are moving towards the production of grain neutral spirits, which is even a grade higher. We heard from Commonwealth Agri-Energy this summer at the FEW, made that announcement that they're moving forward with a project to produce grain neutral spirits to upgrade from what they are currently achieving. So that's exciting. And these markets for these products are interesting and they're worth exploring. But we also want to cover, again, kind of like we want to do with distillers corn oil, how it's being done and what technological changes are being made at the plant to allow these producers to achieve these new goals. That will be distributed at the Growth Energy Biofuels Summit. October is our lab issue. Lab topics make our list every year, and they really need to. As I said earlier, the labs is where a lot of the data is being gleaned, captured. Just so much happening in the lab that is vital to every aspect of ethanol production, and there's a lot to cover. When it comes to ethanol laboratory practices, equipment, technologies, the purchasing that goes on, the third-party testing, and the almost limitless field of quality assurance, quality control. There's so much to cover, and that will be our October theme. We'll get into all those subjects and more, including lab quality management itself. LQM is a big topic in and of itself. If your company supplies lab products, equipment, technology, if you're a third-party service provider, talk to us about this October issue. We'd love to not only tell your story, but also the story of how you're working with your clients. This issue is going to, the Fuel Ethanol Lab Conference, very good fit, and the Distillers Grains Technology Council annual meeting. November, carbon capture and storage. With November, we decided to take on this theme, one that's obviously not been on our list in the past. This is a relatively new subject. And CCS, I will say, is very exciting. It's a huge opportunity for our industry. It's something that I think every producer in the nation is keeping an eye on, if not actively involved in or engaged in. I think we'll see stories in this issue that are beyond just carbon capture and storage, but I wanted to hone in on that subject as a theme to see how it would play out. Certainly, there are other low carbon strategies, other low carbon things that producers are doing. We just had a whole event on it this summer that we can cover in this November issue. But at the center of it, we want to talk about CCS and what's happening there. We are seeing, I think the most high-profile project that we've heard about, and there are a number of CCS projects happening in the industry, but the highest profile one that's been proposed is the Summit Carbon Solution Pipeline, which plans to aggregate, and transport CO2 from at least 30 Midwest ethanol plants via pipeline for permanent geologic storage in North Dakota oil wells. So very exciting. And again, not the only one. There are dozens of other plants involved with other projects, and a lot of people are predicting that at least half the industry, 60-70% of the industry may be doing CCS in the years ahead. This is being done, of course, because when your plant is participating in CCS, you can lower your carbon intensity rating, your score, by as much as 50%. And so, of course, that's the driver. That gives these plants that ultra low CI that allows them to, ultimately garner top dollar for their ethanol prices in those low carbon markets out west, and ultimately other low carbon markets that may pop up throughout the country. So carbon capture and storage in November, and it will be distributed at the FOLIX World Ethanol and Biofuels Conference. Hopefully they enjoy that issue over at that conference. Finally, we're going to close out the year. December, we'll focus on energy efficiency and water management. Well, maybe not the most exciting issue to everybody. It's something that's near and dear to all of us in the ethanol industry who want to see this industry not only be a participant, but recognized as a key part of the solution in the battle against climate change. And also to preserve our water resources. It's such a hot topic right now. Ethanol plants we've come a long ways in terms of progressively year by year reducing the energy and water that's needed to operate our plants. It's a true success story, a huge accomplishment. And so we want to close out the year with a look at our industry's continued journey toward becoming one of the most energy efficient and eco-friendly fuels on the planet, in large part due to the technology providers and service providers, people like yourselves, that are continuously introducing innovative new products and resources related to energy efficiency, water management to our producers. So we'll end the year with that very important subject, and we'll mail that issue to all of our regular subscribers, of course, but also the attendees of every 2022 webinar that our magazine does, which could be not only hundreds of people, but perhaps a few thousand extra readers receiving that December issue. That'll be nice. And that's it. That'll wrap up our lineup for the 2022 Ethanol Producer Magazine themes. We're excited to get started on that in just a very short amount of time. A special thank you to today's sponsor, the FEW, the Fuel Ethanol Workshop and Expo, which again will be held in Minneapolis, Minnesota, June 13th through the 15th. Hope you can all plan to be there. We've got some upcoming events, both webinars and live events. We've got a webinar coming up, Improving Performance and Efficiency with Analytics. We talked about data and analytics, and there's a webinar on that subject happening on the 15th of September, followed by Biomass Magazine's Editorial Outlook on the 16th, Pellet Mills Editorial Outlook on the 28th, and Biodiesel Magazine's Editorial Outlook on the 30th. And then several months later, please mark on your calendar the International Biomass Conference and Expo, the nation's largest biomass conference and one our company organizes, will be held in Jacksonville, Florida. And as I mentioned, the International Fuel Ethanol Workshop and Expo in Minneapolis. And with that, here is the offer that I believe John mentioned earlier. Save 20% on one full-page print advertisement. This offer is available to and exclusive to all attendees of this webinar. So please take advantage of that. And again, if you've got a story idea, a news idea, please contact our editorial department. If you've got interest in advertising in our magazine or on our website, contact any of our sales representatives and we'll be glad to help you out. Thanks for participating in today's webinar. Have a good day.